our businesses, most of us have experienced the accountability conversation. A deadline gets missed, a commitment falls through, and the response is call a meeting, reinforce expectations, and remind the team that accountability matters. And yet, a few weeks later, you're having the same conversation again. There's a reason for that. And today, we're going to break it down into 3 practical moves you can make right now to stop treating the symptom and start fixing the root cause. Hi, I'm Penny Cook, a fractional COO and strategic operations consultant, helping product and consumer brands install, upgrade, and run scalable operations and operational systems that reflect the founder's unique vision and ambition. And with me today is...
Hi, Penny. I'm Sarah Wilson, a fractional COO and operational turnaround partner for small to medium businesses. I help founders unlock the ability to scale with the tools and the amazing teams they already have. I work with founders to install structure and repeatable processes. Let's get into it.
Get into it.
Absolutely. I love this topic. I think, accountability, you hear it so often. And what does it mean? And I'm really excited to dig into this today. And the first tip I really wanted to leave our listeners with is around stop treating accountability as just a conversation. So I'm gonna say something that might kind of be like not everyone might agree with, might be a little uncomfortable to hear.
Go do it. Pull off the Band-Aid.
When you find yourself talking about accountability repeatedly, the act of simply talking about it doesn't actually mean that you're prioritizing. It actually means if you're talking about it over and over and over, it means that the system underneath is actually broken. Accountability is not something that you install in your culture through a bunch of reminders about it. It really comes down to a condition that you create in your business through how you've designed your business. And when you haven't designed for accountability, that's all it becomes as a conversation. So you have it, things improve briefly, and you're like, oh yeah, you've talked about accountability enough, and now I see it. But really, things kind of do the little bit of a dip up, and then you're kind of back in the same room having the same accountability conversations again and again. So it really comes down to asking yourself honestly, how many times have you had this conversation in the last 6 months? And if the answer is more than twice, the conversation really didn't help the situation. You really need to evaluate the structure in your business and look at what needs to change.
Yeah.
And that's what exactly I think brings us nicely into the next couple tips.
Yeah,
When you
it's
think
Sarah,
about,
this is such a good point because it's the difference between what you say and what you do.
Mhm.
And your your peers and your team members know when there's a difference between what you're saying and what you're doing. And often there is a desire for what it is that you're saying, that accountability that you're talking about, to be the way the team is going to act. But if the actions don't match the words, you're going to keep having those conversations. So what do you do when the
Mhm.
actions don't match the words? Let's get into tip 2, close the expectation gap
Yes.
before you even call it an accountability problem. So this is like, what are your expectations? So now we're getting into making sure that the actions do match the words. This is a tip that I wish more founders heard earlier because it really reframes how you think about what accountability is on your team. So when a commitment is missed, your instinct is to look at the person who missed the commitment. But a
Mm.
lot of what looks like an accountability failure is actually an expectation gap in
Yes.
disguise, right?
Absolutely.
Vague
Yes.
handoffs, assumed content, undocumented ownership. And often you're going to hear somebody say, I told you this was going to happen. And there aren't listening devices for those cues in your team, whether it's the ability to follow up on something that was said in a meeting or when an email goes out, who is actually acknowledging, picking that up and bringing that into reality if there's a challenge on your team. So really ask yourself before you have the accountability conversation, what was the expectation? What was my expectation as a leader? What was the person's expectation who I think missed something? And did we have absolute clarity between the two of us, or do we have an expectation gap that we could fill in?
I think you're so right. I like to go into these It's completely normal when things go wrong to have a reaction. We're human, that is normal. But I like to temper that reaction with really the spirit of understanding that people come to work and generally want to do their best, right? The people we hire, we work with them, we care about them, and generally people do their best. So, with
Yep.
that
Absolutely.
lens in mind, you then have the conversation with yourself about what in the system like went wrong or broke down. And you do, you brought a really you framed it really well, Penny, about that gap between expectation and reality. And that's once you start thinking about that and digging deeper, it really actually feeds quite well into the next tip, which is going through that process of, maybe own your misses publicly. So the third tip that I want
Yeah.
to leave our listeners with is kind of the hardest and sometimes I think the most powerful. When you do that work of that accountability gap and it comes up that maybe part of the problem was didn't communicate properly or that gap was really systemic like we talked about. Something happens to the room when you as the leader, the owner actually owns up to your misses. The that if you go the opposite way and that deflection and you play that blame game, that can have a real impact on modeling that accountability for your team, right?
Yep.
If you're the owner, the leader, and you're owning up to your role in that miss that we're trying to correct, um, there's really nothing like it for the teams that report to you. Seeing that in action, seeing you model that accountability, that's really, in my opinion, nothing short of magic.
It's true. It changes the DNA of your organization to do that, Sarah, and I think it changes it in the best way possible. I'm working with a client right now. We recently had a leadership conversation that went very poorly because the person in charge at the top did not like what was presented and had a different expectation than the people doing the work, and that came to a head in a meeting which ended up being ugly. And in retrospect, we all want to do things differently in hindsight. And this leader really thought about how that went and what they wanted the organization to do as a result. And said, you know what, as the leader, it is my job to heal the organization from this tough point that I
Yes.
almost created for them. We all kind of created it together.
Yes.
But they started by sending out an email and saying, hey, I didn't deal with this very well. I've got some work to do with you guys because I want to make sure I have your trust and we all are moving in the same direction and we have the leeway to do it. And it was an incredibly vulnerable email and it landed in a sore spot with those leaders who report to that person. It landed like a salve. It was beautiful. And then they went about individually working with everyone on, here's what was said. Here's what the expectation was. Let's model how we can do this differently in the future, and really took that tough moment as a place to make the organization stronger and model what it looks like to maybe mess up a little bit, but come back and heal and repair. And the accountability as a result looks completely different because we're able to communicate differently based on, hey, it didn't go well like this. We all modeled that. And then this leader took it upon themselves to really model that right kind of behavior. And kudos to that kind of leadership in an
Absolutely.
organization.
Kudos. That the salve, when you use that terminology, I thought that was
Yeah.
fabulous because it's what a wonderful example of a leader modeling the behavior that you want to see. In doing so, you give permission to your team to then have the freedom to make a mistake, to own up to that mistake. It's so tempting to kind of do the things shifted and timelines changed. And I think it's natural for anyone to kind of want to use that language, a little bit of deflection. But I've, in my own experience, have gotten the best response from teams when I'm like, hey, I own this piece that I messed up, I misunderstood, I didn't communicate clearly. And, in your example, Penny, it brought everybody together. You have this wonderful opportunity of the great times define us, but even more so is when the hard things happen. How do we handle those as a team And if we, if we handle that with vulnerability and honesty, we have a real opportunity to move forward in a really positive way.
Yeah, handled the right way, failures like that can create incredibly strong muscles in your organization. And just to be clear, I'm sorry you feel that way isn't the apology you think it is, and it's
Yeah.
not helping close that accountability expectation gap,
Yes.
right? So accountability really, it doesn't fail because people are resistant to accountability. Most of the times on your team, you're going to find that people want that accountability. They're trying to find paths to really get to it. But accountability fails because the system wasn't built to support it. So when leaders treat accountability as a simple conversation to have rather than a condition to create, real actions to put in place, you stay stuck in that loop because people are going to be confused about how to participate in it and how to really stand up and own that accountability that they are supposed to have. So communicate clear expectations before you measure performance against them. Pressure test your handoffs before something slips, and own your own misses in front of the team to model that behavior. And you'll be amazed at the power that has in your organization and how much more you're able to move the ball forward, especially when times are tough. So if what we talked about today sounds familiar in your business, please reach out to us. You can find us on our website, operating-on-purpose.com, or on LinkedIn. And we would love to talk with you because great businesses don't just happen, they operate on purpose.
Awesome.
Thanks
Thank you
for the
so much, Kim.
conversation, Sarah.
Yes. Have a great one, everyone listening. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.